last time, and it was all about food. So this is just gives you an idea for those of you that didn't come last time. It gives you an idea of what we did. Oh, sorry about that. And how things are going to work this time as well. So the way tonight's going to work is we're going to talk a little bit about some of the pledges that we made last time. Anyone who's here that came last time and does want to tell us how they are doing with their pledges, then that would be absolutely brilliant. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to hand over to Pete in a sec to do that. And then after that, we're going to hear from our speakers and see. Sorry, I'm just having a bit of trouble with my presentation. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. And yeah, and hear from the speakers that we've got have coming tonight. So over to you for now, Pete.
Hi everybody, welcome to tonight, our third talking action, as Alison just said. Part of what we do is we make sure that we have some fantastic speakers to talk about the subject that we want to talk about. But what makes this a bit different is you all have to do some hard work yourselves and come up with some pledges at the end of it that you want to make as individuals, but then we find the patterns in between those pledges and we bring ourselves together as a community to take action. So what we really wanted to try and do is get people who've come before to talk about the pledges that they made last time, see if they made any headway, see if they made any connections. So it's the brave bit to see if somebody would like to unmute, talk about a pledge that they might have made and how it's gone over the last month. You can talk about it in any way you like. And it's always difficult to find somebody who'll come up at the beginning. I don't know if there's anybody out there who, we do have a bit prepared for this to get things started.
I'll go.
Oh, I was wondering, Mark. Thanks, come to the rescue. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, so on the screen you can now see, obviously there's all the little pledges. So there's obviously a lot of good ones there. In the top left, growing more food at home in brief. I'm in the relatively fortunate position to have some personal space to grow food in a back garden, namely. That happens to be southeast facing, which is quite useful. In short, growing more food at home. I've moved into this house. I'm now in a year last November. Kind of began transforming the garden to some extent all across the last year and will continue to do so. I started a few bits of fruit and veg, peas, a pumpkin, strawberries, a little fruit cane or two, and I'm going to be expanding that in my garden, being more ambitious with the sort of ground I can cover and what I'm doing in pots. I'm also thinking about talking to local people, friends, about passing on seeds, passing on plants and so on, because I think it's very important to have seed diversity and local non-capitalist controlled seeds and food. So that's my sort of little mission. It will involve growing more and, you know, possibly helping others to grow more. It's not going to replace Tesco, you know, that they're not going to shut down Askham, Brian, because Askham, whatever it's called, because I'm growing, you know, a couple of strawberries in the back garden. But it's a start and it's a connection to nature. It feels very real. And, you know, it's something good to get into, part of the obviously sufficiency plan. But, you know, even if it doesn't replace your weekly shop, and obviously it won't, it is fun and it is obviously sustainable, 0 food miles. So
you've come up with some, you've come up with sort of amazing parts to it, because it's not just about replacing your food shop, but the fact that you're also thinking about it being collaborative with other people, sort of sharing things, the fact that some of your food can come from there as well, but also that you can connect to nature through it. You know, you can understand where food comes from, and I think that's something that we've lost a little bit with Tesco's and well, let's not just name one supermarket, all the supermarkets that maybe take away some of that connection with where our food is grown. That's incredible. Thanks, Mark. Is there anybody else who had something on the list or anything they've been thinking about? I can see the chat's going off really well on this one as well, so that's a great place to put it in.
People have got a few tips that I can look at. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, we can all, but yeah, I can.
Was there anybody else who had something out there? I'll just give about 5 seconds silence so somebody can come in if they want.
I think we've got, oh, was that going to be you, Audrey? Sorry. Who was that going to be? I was just going to say in the chat, we've got Audrey saying that every windowsill, conservatory and greenhouse is full of seedlings ready to share via Edible York. So she's obviously been busy as well.
Fantastic. Was there something you were going to bring up, Anna, as well?
I just thought I'd report that so far I pledged in January that I would do 3 days a week vegan diet, and yeah, pleased to report that so far we've managed it, and my partner as well, and we haven't been stuffing our faces with cheese on the other days. We're veggie anyway, but we are not trying to make up for not having sort of non-vegan food on the other day. So far so good.
That's such a good point that you could sort of say, oh, I'm going to eat vegan for 4 days and then just eat steak.
Double down steak on other days. Well,
that's brilliant, Ivana. Thanks for that.
That's perfect, because that bit's all about bringing those actions that you're taking forward. We've now got some great content coming up, some speakers and specialists around active travel, so we can start to think about that area as well. I think that's back now to you, Ivana, I think, to introduce the panel.
Yes, so we've got a last minute addition to the panel. We'd asked a few groups around York to sort of join in, but we've got Angela from the City of York Councils in the end. But I'll introduce speakers sort of one at a time so that, oh, sorry, just noticed someone else coming in. So first off, we've got Dr. Matt Sawyer from SE Sustainability.
I think we're actually going to Alistair first, Ivana, from Galba. Sorry
okay.
to interrupt.
Sorry. No, should have checked on my notes. So Alistair Cameron from the Group for Action on Leeds Bradford Airport, Alistair has been campaigning with the group for the past year, so I'll hand over to him to introduce the group.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me all right? Good.
Yep.
Perhaps it might be helpful I just say where.
Sorry, Alistair, can I just interrupt? We can hear you perfectly, but we can only see the very top of your face. Can you move your camera down a little bit?
Right, how's that?
Perfect, that's much better. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. How did I get involved in this? I got involved because I attended what was called a community consultation event in February of 2020 last year. Which was advertised in the newspaper as Leeds Bradford Airport wants to build one of the most sustainable airport terminals in the UK. We're inviting the people of Yorkshire to contribute to this proposal. Join the community consultation event. So I went along just really out of curiosity, quite interested. I was wondering about, flying as an issue perhaps for myself as well. When I went there, I found that almost the whole exhibition was about the new terminal and lauding the fact it was going to be net carbon zero. But there was one board which said there may be some extra flights at night. And it turned out that some extra flights at night turned out to be actually 20 or 21,000 more flights a year, many of which were going to take place in what's called the shoulder period between 10 and 11 at night, and 11:30 in fact, and 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. A very significant increase, particularly in the summertime. But virtually no mention was being made of this. And when I asked about, well, will these extra planes produce extra carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas emissions? They said, well, there will be some extra. I said, well, how much extra? And they said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, how will you compensate for this to stay net zero for flying overall? They said, well, we'll plant some trees. And I said, how many trees? And they didn't know. And that got me a little bit concerned that what we were was being served up as a new green initiative to have a sustainable net zero terminal was in fact masking something really very serious indeed. And if one went back a year from that, Leeds City Council had declared a climate emergency following a march of 500, 600 people, grandparents, parents and children through the centre of Leeds. But what nobody knew at the time was at the same time as Leeds City Council were declaring this, senior planning officers in Leeds City Council were having conversations with Leeds Bradford Airport about this expansion of the airport, which was not announced until about a year later formally. And when one went into the detail, not only was it going to cause great disturbance at night time for the people who lived under the flight path, and that includes quite significant adverse health effects, it was also going to cause a massive increase in greenhouse emissions, so big, in fact, that it would actually account for the whole greenhouse gas emissions budget of Leeds City Council within a period of 10 years. So on the one hand, we had the council saying that they were declaring a climate emergency. On the other hand, they were in working with Leeds Bradford Airport to get approval of this massive expansion in flight numbers and passenger numbers from 4 million to 7 million over the course of the subsequent few years. And alarm bells were beginning to ring big style because it seemed quite inconsistent. How can you say you're having a climate emergency at the same time being possibly going to approve the expansion in flight numbers and passenger numbers carrying passengers from Bradford Airport? And it turned out that in February, Leeds City Council planning panel approved this, and subject to some minor extra conditions, they finally approved it, and it is now with the Secretary of State because it's being built, some of it's on green belt land. And at this moment, GALBA, the group I'm involved in, is very actively encouraging people to sign a petition to the Secretary of State who can call in this petition and have a full planning inquiry and writing as many letters as possible to the Secretary of State in the hope that a full planning inquiry will expose how this is quite out of step with the national policies on climate change, and a major increase in aviation. 4 or 5 airports are wanting to expand their numbers, and yet the climate committee of the government's own advisory committee in its 6th budget says you cannot expand aviation like this. It is incompatible with the country meeting its target of net zero by 2050. So it's an active campaign. And right at this moment, I know that the number of people signing the petition is going up quite rapidly, but we want as many people as possible to sign that. So that's a brief introduction, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions which people might have, or try and answer them on this subject. But it is big bucks, because if one wants to make a serious impact on greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Leeds and Yorkshire, the main thing that can be done is to stop the expansion of flights from Leeds Bradford Airport. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for that, Alistair. Have you got the petition link to hand? Would you be able to pop it into the chat for everyone?
I will, yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, I can do that.
And also
yes.
just to the GALBA website, so that we can everyone can go and have a look at all the action you guys are doing and how we can all get involved.
Sure, yeah,
Brilliant.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Alistair. That's great.
And I was going to add, we'll be sharing the links afterwards as well. So if you don't catch them in the chat, then you can you'll get them later. And I should have said that, yeah, we're giving the speakers around 5 minutes. So brilliant, Alistair, you were just a little bit over. It's great. Next up, we've got Dr. Matt Sawyer, but I should also say, please, if you do have questions for later, try and put them in the chat. If you just start with a Q for question and who it's for. If it's not general to everyone on the panel, then we'll do it. We've got Lucy keeping an eye out for questions to ask later. So please use that facility. But now over to Dr. Matt Sawyer.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. Do I just say next slide in a Chris Whitty type way? And brilliant, yes. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So I'm Matt Sawyer. I'm a GP by training, but I actually spend a lot of my time looking at all things carbon. So whether they be carbon emissions, carbon literacy, carbon footprinting, or carbon reduction. And part of that is involves travel and some of the damage that travel does. So the first very obvious question is, does travel cause damage? Well, yes is the unfortunate answer. We know that air pollution from carbonised travel, particularly in towns and cities, really increases the risk of heart and lung disease, dementia, mental health problems. It affects school children in terms of their educational attainment. Next slide, please. And it really affects people throughout their lifetime. So it doesn't actually matter whether you haven't even been born yet. And the sort of, the embryo as it grows during pregnancy through children. So asthma, for example, about a third of new asthma cases are caused by poor air quality. That's let alone the exacerbations of asthma. We know that there are all sorts of things that happen both through childhood into adulthood, and even in adulthood, things like cataracts, things like Parkinson's disease have got links to worse air quality or air pollution. And a lot of this does come from travel. Next slide, please. So breaking this down into what this means to me, you, and our friends, family, neighbours, and communities that we live in. Well, this is a book by a chap called Mike Berners-Lee. I always think of him as the poor relation to Tim Berners-Lee, who's often known as the father of the internet or the godfather of the internet. But actually, I think that Mike is a more important and more influential figure. So this is from one of his books, and this looks at the damage that traveling around a town or a city or around the countryside does for different vehicles. So what this shows is that if somebody has got a diesel car and they drive it through a town or a city, for 1 mile travelled, it causes 12 minutes of life to be taken from the community around it. So that 5 mile trip to the supermarket or to the GP surgery or to drop the kids off is 1 hour of life being lost for one journey in one car once. So this is something which is increasingly important, and we really know that there's a lot of places that are now wanting to have clear air zones in towns and cities, and this is the sort of reason behind it. So electric vehicles are something which is being lauded as the way forward, and certainly there's no tailpipe emissions, but this isn't necessarily going to solve all of the problems that people think that cars currently cause. Next slide, please. So there are some other better ways to try and think about travel and transport. And this is really about active travel. So active travel does a whole lot of good things. It improves you yourself. It improves your health, your quality of life, whether that be the physical or the mental. But it also helps the community and the society that we live in and that we're part of. So instead of us, as we drive a car, causing air pollution that's affecting other people, actually, we stop that by becoming more active in our travel, so that our community benefits. We've certainly found over the last 12 months during lockdown that as people have started walking, and I think there was a report out, a survey that was out today that said that one of the things that people are going to, or two of the things that people are going to keep doing even after the pandemic has passed, is taking more walks locally and doing more local shopping. And actually, these are both really, really important for the vitality of our own communities. So whether we want to think about the physical effects and reducing heart disease, reducing diabetes, reducing some cancers, the benefits of exercise are phenomenal. Mentally, we can improve sleep and anxiety and depression. We can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's later in life. We're helping the air quality in our local areas, but we're also showing influence, and we're saying to other people, this is something that we can do, and passes on good habits to other members of our society. Next slide, please. It's about to appear. So the next slide will show you some of the things that we can start to do for ourselves. And obviously it depends on each of us as individuals as to which ones may work better than others. So for example, there are things that we can do ourselves. We can think about where we work, or where we socialize, or where we do recreational activities. So instead of walking to work, it's walking to the park. It's thinking about our personalised travel. So absolutely in agreement with Alistair, our previous speaker. It's thinking about the sort of travel plans that we could have and still go on holiday. So this isn't about saying to people, don't go on holiday. It's about thinking about the method of transport. Some people who work for companies, so I've just been doing some work with a big organisation who are looking at how they can work from home, how they can share journeys, how they can change their policies so that they don't have any diesels, for example, as part of their fleet, how economy travel is the preference, whether it be trains or planes. And next slide, please. This is the final slide. One of the other things is really important is about having active towns, and this is about having town planning so that we can actually walk or cycle to our destinations. And there's a concept known as a 20-minute town, which is really useful, so that the things that we use on a daily basis or a weekly basis are within 20 minutes walk from where we live. So one of the things that I try and do is help to lobby local authorities and others to say, we need more cycle routes. We need it to be prioritised. We need it to be walking. We need to have places that we want to go within a sensible distance for us as individuals and us as communities. And that's it from me. I'll put a link in the chat, so if people want to email me or drop me a line, ask questions, please do so. But I hope that that's been helpful. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. That was really interesting. Well, I'm busy trying to do a couple of things, so I'll have to review your slides afterwards as well, which is a good thing. So I'll quickly hand over to Dr. Thomas Sherwin, who's an atmospheric research scientist who in his spare time writes the Little Eco blog, and is a good friend. But he's talk about how him and his wife have reduced their environmental footprint from traveling. So over to you, to Thomas.
Hello, yeah, so I'm Thomas, but I'm here as Little Eco Tea from a blog that my partner and I, we run and have done nearly for 10 years now. I looked up just before this Zoom call, and mostly we talk about kind of eco-innovation, but really we've been on a bit of a journey making various lifestyle changes to lower our carbon footprint, and some of those changes have been some quite technical ones, and so this kind of slide hopefully illustrates some of those, and some of them are less technical, some of them are a bit more kind of down to earth. So next slide, please. Here I'm going to try and focus on what we've done to look at our travel and transport footprint. And today was actually quite an exciting day. It's a bit of a coincidence. My e-bike arrived today. So we are now a 2 e-bike family. And this is really something that I've come round to over the last few years, particularly because it kind of displaces for me the kind of trips where cycling is not really the focus. So like when I'm going to meet people or doing the shopping, I've even been known to move a trailer full of manure with an e-bike to my allotment. But so they serve a role, but also so do standard bikes. And those are what we've had for many, many years. And what we've done, and a lot of this stuff is actually very accessible, and many people will have done different things on this slide. But for me, because I live partly between York and London, I use a folding bike, and that allows me to kind of do multimodal trips. So to use my bike with buses, tubes, trams, trains, and end up with the lowest carbon kind of option overall, and join these things together. But sometimes we end up having to use, sometimes we end up having to use the road for places that we can't get to by train or public transit, or we for some reason need to carry a load. And for that, in the top right, you see is a car club car. So we've driven EVs mostly for about 8 years now. In the back of that car is a selection of things, including canoe. And basically, an EV can do what other cars can do fine. And for the last few years, we've not been hindered by any of the technology. Another thing that we've found interesting recently is EVs for deliveries. So we've been getting more and more of our deliveries through electric vans, but also we've been getting our deliveries where possible through cargo bikes, particularly electric cargo bikes. So in the bottom right corner, you can see there a photo of actually my greenhouse being delivered last week by a cargo bike. So as I say, I live partly between York and London. So actually this is a London service there, Pedal Me. But in York, there's also a service called Indigo Delivery, and I'm aware of some people who have used it and seem to speak highly of it. So yeah, that might be the equivalent service. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I haven't actually had an opportunity to try them out yet, so I can't personally say anything about them. So next slide, please. Cool. So as well as short distance trips and commuting, we also like long distance trips and moderate distance trips. And some of these we'll want to keep on doing. But as the other two speakers have said, like avoiding flying is a great way of kind of reducing your CO2 by like 80% or so. People often don't realize how good trains are in Europe. And the site I always recommend is Seat 61, Man on Seat 61. And I just type in where I want to go, where I'm starting from, and 61, and I end up with selection of choices. And I look through and read and decide where to go. And we've done all sorts of different trips over the years, including through the Balkans. I've been across Japan, variously across Europe. I've gone across the States. And one of the things that I kind of try and like tell people is that often the high-speed option beats the flying option, and I don't think people realize that enough. So colleagues and friends will take the same trip as me, whether they're joining me on a holiday or on a work trip, and their trips can often cost the same or more, but often can be an awful lot less pleasant. And a good example of this was recently I was working in Vienna, and I got the train there, and I woke up off the train on a sleeper that I'd caught from a nice cheap simple ticket to Cologne, and then an overnight from Cologne to Vienna. And everyone else had rather nightmarish air trips, but whatever they had, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable affair. Whereas the kind of way of traveling is more of a kind of like a road trip almost, and it does take a bit more time. So I do tend to have stops en route for comfort or exploring. I could make very similar, or take very similar amounts of time, but I often don't, because I'd rather kind of enjoy it and choose a city to stop off en route to try and see it and kind of experience it a bit. Okay, so I'll finish with my final slide. So next slide, please, which is just kind of giving a bit more context. It's a bit broader. So one of the things that I think I've realized over a few years now is a lot of the things that we need to support to allow us to get to our carbon budgets are things that don't actually directly benefit us. Some of these things can be things like e-scooters, which some of you may use and really find appealing. I've used them in various cities. However, they're not really for me. Similarly, like rural buses, I live in a city, but I really support rural buses wherever I have the opportunity. And similarly, national train and freight capacity, which is a huge bottleneck for us as the UK to achieve our carbon reduction targets. The other one on that list is probably, you might have come across in the news recently, which is low traffic neighborhoods. And these are spaces where you filter the streets to allow for active and accessible travel. So things like cycling, scooting and mobility scooters, etc., to use the streets below a safety threshold. And on the right there, I've got 3 examples of ones near us. Some of them temporary and some of them permanent. And a lot of these have been around for decades. So in where I'm based partially in Ealing, there's actually over 50 historic ones, and there's about 4 new low traffic neighborhoods. But these really actually give a genuine choice for people to choose active or accessible travel. And so I guess the final point I'd make with that is just to say that really, when it comes to campaigning for these things, we need to put safety and accessibility first. There's no point in making routes that only certain people can use, certain ages or abilities. And what we've seen from these temporary COVID changes is that actually, if you do these kind of changes, whether it's cycle lanes or low traffic neighborhoods, people can have a genuine choice. And when they have a genuine choice, they do choose like these healthier, lower carbon options. So I think I'll leave it there. I'll also pop an email in the chat. I'm happy to take questions and comments here and afterwards. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Thomas. It was brilliant. I'm letting the speakers talk a bit longer. I hope that's all right, because it's just so interesting. I'm just learning things myself, so it's brilliant. I wonder if you, Thomas, might have a link. I know there's a sort of now national campaign because one of the London cycle routes, which was massively successful during COVID, has actually been taken off in Kensington. It might be worth sort of directing people to the petition to sort of try and reinstate it and support the campaign around that, because I think it's really important, not just for London, but for everywhere, because yeah, I think it is an important one. But without further ado, so our final speaker is Angela Blackwood from the City of York Council Sustainable Transport team, who will share some of the things that are available in York to support our choices. So over to you, Angela. Oh, you're very quiet, Angela. Not yet. Ooh. Fortunately, we didn't get to do a sound check. Maybe if you...
We definitely could. We could hear you earlier, Angela, when you first came in. Let's see if I can.
Would you have headphones?
Well, I'm moving up the volume. Is that any better?
It's getting better. Definitely.
It's just not going anywhere fast. Sorry.
That seems okay now.
Yeah,
Is that better?
I think it's
Can you
okay.
hear me?
Yeah, that's okay.
Is that
Yeah.
okay? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Smashing. Yeah, forgive me, to try and contain all that I'd want to say in 5 minutes, I've had to be really structured in my thinking. But thanks to Matt and to Thomas for actually covering a lot of points that I had to leave out. So it's actually a brilliant part of, you know, to follow on from 2 great speakers with so much background information. So if I can bring it back to York and an active travel in York, that's perfect. So yeah, I work in sustainable transport. I actually have 2 roles in sustainable transport, which gives me quite a broad breadth of experience. One, I work in road safety. So I actually help deliver the council's road safety bikeability instruction in schools, but also adult training, our urban cycle skills, adult cycle training, which we've been running for many, many years in York. So we're actually way ahead of Boris Johnson's announcement in the summer that all adults should receive cycle training. So I've been doing that since 2009. Great to see Jane here. Jane and I have met through that many years ago. I also work in the iTravel team, which is helping to deliver a programme of behaviour change around active sustainable travel in the city. But first of all, I want us just to come back to us as individuals, and I'd like you to just take a little minute to think about your own day-to-day journeys on a daily basis, just in general terms, and just have a little look at this first slide. And just have a think, are your day-to-day journeys sometimes, usually, often, maybe, occasionally looking a little bit like this in this particular slide? Or alternatively, secondly, if we can have the next slide, are they more like this? Sometimes, occasionally, often, yeah? And just have a little reflect, because actually these two photographs were taken within about 20 meters of each other, maybe not even 20 meters. I'm not very good at distance, but really not a stone's throw from each other over one car park in town. So these are two options just literally within a stone's throw from each other. Just have a little immediate check about how those two photographs make you feel, and how your regular day-to-day journeys and how you take them, how you make them, make you feel about this. And then I think we'll go to the cycling slide. It's a little bit more gentle for this time of night. Okay, thanks. So traditionally, my work has been really well known, along with the team, when I just our work, for the resources that we can actually help with. So if we go to the next slide. And somebody's been doing a fantastic job in the chat. Thank you so much for that, for linking people to all sorts of walks, routes, guides and maps and such. So this is traditionally what we've been very much known for. And I've also mentioned the urban cycle skills that we as a city provide an awful lot. Every primary school, every school in York is offered, both primary and secondary school, the National Standards Bikeability Training. So we train hundreds and hundreds of children every year on the National Standards scheme. And most schools actually take up our involvement with them. And it's a really, really powerful scheme. It's not like the old cycling proficiency, where I still meet adults who were traumatized by failing their cycling proficiency. It's not pass or fail. It's very much about building blocks for confidence, starting in very quiet areas and moving to busier roads and situations. So that's very common to the essence of the work that we do. And if we move to the next slide as well, please. You'll see that also much of my work and our work behind the scenes is packed with all sorts of jobs, campaigns. So the centre of the photograph, these very fine cyclists there, that's only 1986. This is clock out time at the carriage works on Holgate Road. And I still talk to people now when I work with businesses and schools in that area about, you know, how it was. And people would say, oh yeah, there's no way you'd go down Holgate Road at that time, clock out time at the carriage works, because you'd just never get through. It was just this sea of bicycles. So we work in all sorts of different ways, using partners, hooks and campaigns, whether it's Clean Air Day, whether it's working with Sustrans and the Walk to School initiatives, whether it's trying to encourage people to think about their health through improving active travel. And I wouldn't go anywhere without mentioning Scarborough Bridge. Those of you living in York may remember how it used to look, which is a little bit in the consultation picture there, but now how different it is and how accessible it is for everybody to walk or cycle over that bridge now above flood level as well. So it's an absolutely fantastic resource that took a lot of years and a lot of fundraising in the meantime, but we've now got it. So that's kind of the nature of some of the things I'm involved in. But like every other part of society and within our communities, the pandemic has brought change, and with it its own challenges and opportunities. What we've had mentioned too is Matt saying earlier about how walking and cycling boomed as people were allowed to do it for exercise, and people have found an enjoyment of doing that, and many people wanting to keep it up. And whether that's been simply about just getting out of the house, whether that's been trying to entertain the kids when they've been homeschooling to go out and look at nature, as there've been lots of recommendations to do that, or whether it's actually doing without realizing the health benefits of Shinrin-yoku, you know, which is the sort of tree bathing, just being out in a park, in a woodland, and just experiencing all that benefit of walking beneath and with trees. We've had government massive major policy announcements, and Department of Transport with its relocation of road space, the Active Travel Fund, gear change document, all sorts of things which this year have catapulted and revolutionised people talking about active travel and wanting to make a change. And in York, we've done actually really well with our bids to DFT, to Department of Transport, and behind the scenes now as I speak, there's a huge amount of intense work going on around engineering requirements, technical difficulties, political decision making, and all sorts of other things. And we're very excited to look to a future where there will be a delivery of major new infrastructure in the city, which will be a real intent statement and also create real opportunities. But infrastructure is one thing, having infrastructure is great, but actually we need to do all the other things alongside of it still, the cycle training and behaviour change and such. So why does it matter more than ever at the moment to consider our journeys? Some points have already been covered, but in York, we actually have a declared climate emergency. Work is in hand to create an action plan. Baseline at the moment is showing that 31% of carbon emissions in York are from the transport sector, 31%. So actually what we need is a tapestry of actions which will need to address that, including what's been called modal shift. So including the walking and cycling increase. So why did I actually start with asking each of you to think about your own daily journeys and how it felt? Because I really believe that one journey at a time, that change is possible, and how we can do that, how we can help to do that as individuals, and how we can help to do that as a community. And that's really the kind of bit where I'd like to finish, is what can we do? And I think the first thing is for every one of us to consider every journey that we make, and to choose the mode of travel that we can make and we can do. So we don't aspire, we're not encouraging people to aspire to become a cyclist all of a sudden, or somebody who always walks. But actually, if we can make a shift of some of our journeys to a different mode of transport, then that will all help. We get to ditch the default, really. And I just briefly share an experience where I was no longer able to cycle for an accident, found myself walking to work on my cycling route. I looked up, there were the city walls. It was in beautiful sunshine. And I thought, why am I down here and not up there? So I went up and walked on the city walls, and I felt like I was on holiday. Actually, it was really amazing. So ditch the default. For every single journey we make, choose the mode. Encourage each other. If we talk about it, if we buddy up, you know, we often hear people say, I wouldn't dare do what you do. I wouldn't dare ride down Tadcaster Road. I wouldn't dare, you know, you're really brave, or I'd really admire you for doing this. You know, families that cycle and walk to school, you hear people saying, oh, I really admire you for that, but there's no way we can do it because of this, that, and the other. So ask us at the council, we can actually help with all sorts of ways to actually help people reduce their barriers, whether it's through cycle training, whether it's a little bit of route planning. 9 times out of 10, people don't need to travel down a major road. With a little bit of route planning and thinking about, you know, a direction, a different way to go, it can make a huge difference. And coming back to the 2 photographs, I don't know how you felt about that. Maybe there'll be a chance to explore it later on. But as somebody who usually does cycle walk, because it does suit me, I know how it feels for other people who actually want a little bit of that. You know, they kind of think, oh, well, yeah, that is what I'd really love, but, and it's the but that I think that we can actually offer help and solutions with. Take part in challenges. Sometimes it's a really good thing to do, whether it's the Walk to School Week, the Big Pedal, the Love to Ride global platform. And I Travel Sustainable Transport will be running our own challenge in the summer, so look out for that. But most, I think, to enjoy, you know, if you've enjoyed cycling and walking for leisure, and this is a story to share, maybe now think about it for other parts of your life, for the commute, for the utility rides, for the shopping, for the, you know, traveling to work and whatever else. And just enjoy being outside and let people see that and want and share a little bit of that. I'll finish there.
That's great. Thank you, Angela. And I'll just add, we were hoping to have York Bike Bells, who also offer sort of cycle training and support for people who want to get into cycling and walking and sort of doing more of it and exploring the city by doing that. And I'll pop a plug in the chat for their cake confidence, which I just think is such a marvelous concept, where you can sort of get more confident about cycling on York streets and have some cake as well and socializing. So their program will be starting on the 8th of May, and they also do a fantastic cycling without age rides. So people who from care homes and sort of who wouldn't be able to cycle anymore, and I believe they are looking for more people to offer that. So there's quite a lot going on in York. I'm sure that the chat will start filling up with all of those. And next we will go for questions. But in the sort of pledging section, you can again sort of chat to each other, and I'm sure more tips will arise from that further. So
so yeah, I think if I can hand over to you, Lucy, now. I think you've been collecting any questions that we've had throughout, but if there's anyone whilst you're going along who thinks of a question, feel free to bob that in as well, and we'll just sort of pull them out as we go.
Yes, there was lots of really interesting links and information, and I've pulled out 3 that I think were actual questions, but please anybody chip in if there was any that I missed. For Thomas, where did you get your e-bike from and how much did it cost? That was from Connie. There were a few other people that chipped in with answers, but could you fill us in on where you got yours from? I think people were talking about conversion kits as well for road bikes, original bikes, whatever they're called, not e-bikes. Over to you, Thomas.
Maybe manual bikes. Yeah,
manual bike, that's the word.
So someone told me my camera wasn't working, so I don't know if it is now.
It is now, yes, we can see you now.
Brilliant. Yeah, so the one I've got is a Brompton Electric. However, I should say I do have a conflict of interest here that my wife works for the company. We did have Bromptons before she worked for them, so we were fans beforehand. But I would suggest, if you're thinking about it, going to a bike shop. I'm a big fan of Cycle Heaven, and you can try out lots of different models there and see what works for you. There are conversion kits. I've ridden a few. I personally don't rate pretty much all of the ones I've tried, but I do understand that that's a much cheaper option. The one that I have heard rated, but I haven't personally tried it, that is a conversion kit rather than an actual e-bike, is the Copenhagen Wheel, which is where you basically swap one of your wheels off and you put like a new wheel on that's got a motor inside the middle of it. And that can be another option, because e-bikes are of the order of 2 to 7 grand, really. Some are cheaper, of the order of like 1,500, but it's not a small purchase. But unlike buying a car, you buy it once and then you're not paying that amount per year. So you have a very significant payback, and I expect mine to pay back in offset taxi rides, bus rides, and other trips over a period of years. And I hope it will keep on going for much, much longer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Matt, I can see you have your hand up. Can I take that question before we move on to any others? Or
it was less of a question, more I was just wanted to just make a point from the last speaker. It was just it snowed a few years ago, and where I live in Darlington, there was a lot of people who then suddenly had to start walking, and they walked their kids to school. And they realized that it was actually quicker to walk their kids than it was to do it in the car. And sometimes we need to have these sort of shocks to the system, whether it be COVID, whether it be a change in the weather, for us to go, I can do something different. And that was, for me, a real turning point for getting people to actually realize the benefits of walking to school rather than driving.
thank you, Matt. Just on conversion kits, we've had a comment from Jane and Segi saying they would recommend a front wheel conversion. It's a lot easier to do and a lot lighter than e-bikes. So that is just a different take on that. I'm just working through my questions that I have in front of me. Thomas, we had another question from Debbie for you. Would the new scooters be more useful if located where buses are infrequent or non-existent?
So I'm not sure where they're currently located in York. And I should say I've actually only used them on the continent. So I've used them in places that actually have what I would call like safe infrastructure. So I was more than happy to like cycle and scoot in those spaces. So it was in Vienna for me that I've used them mostly. There are ones available in London, and again, there are segregated paths, so I'd happily use them there, but I wouldn't use them in the roads, and I've not used them in York, so I'm not sure if I can really comment on what the provision is. I do know that there are some now at the university, who's one of my employers, and I look forward to trying them as soon as I get the chance to come back up to York. I'm currently stuck in London with COVID, so I hope to have an answer for your question, or at least have an opinion on it at some point in the near future.
Thank you, that's great. I'm just making sure I've got all these questions down. Thank you. Ivana's saying that someone on Twitter has also highly rated Switch, spelt SWYTCH, front wheel conversion, waited 8 months for delivery, but sometimes the best things take time. Thanks for that, Ivana. Okay, moving on to questions for Angela, unless anyone has any for the previous 3 speakers. They're the ones I've noted down. We can always come back to them, and apologies, like I say, if I've missed any.
I think Debbie was trying to, has got her hand raised, Lou, so I don't know whether you can see her.
Okay, Debbie, over to you. Thank you, Alison, over to you, Debbie.
Thank you very much. I just find that these electric scooters seem to be out there as a sort of a gimmicky thing. And I feel very strongly that public transport needs to be improved. And I would include taxis within public transport, so that, you know, people just get rid of cars and switch over. And the scooter idea, I can't remember, somebody else was talking about it in some other Zoom. You know, to really make these scooters something useful and not just toys.
Thank you. Yeah,
Alice, and perhaps I can just come back on that slightly. Public transport, I think, is really, really important to have as part of the debate. I was trying to keep mine to walking and cycling, but I think you're really right that we have to look at the whole of sustainable transport. And in York, there is an awful lot of work going on with the public transport bus system. Many of our buses now, I think it's 33. We've got 33 electric buses in York, so there's been a huge amount of work going on to try and improve the bus stock, but now into the future to how we actually create a better public transport system into the future following COVID, where there's such a lot of fear around. And the scooter system in York is a trial that's been run by a private company, by TIA. And so I think if anybody's got any comments, thoughts, and otherwise, they're really interested in hearing about locations. It was a trial that was spreading out. So Thomas, you're quite right, it did start at the university and in the centre of town, but now they are looking at other locations. So, so just a few points on that one. I hope that covers that one for you, Debbie. I was frantically as well trying to watch the chat for questions coming through.
I've got them written down here.
Oh, great, that's lovely.
Let me know if anyone's waving at me, because I've got 3 different screens open, so I can't always see everybody's little icons. So Susan has a few questions for you, Angela, one of which Connie has also posed, so we'll come to that one first. It's around the difficulty around choosing cycling with the lack of safe places to leave a bike. Angela talks about, and Connie said about any ideas from you or anyone else about how to prevent bike theft while you're out shopping. That's one of the things that may deter people from choosing cycling. If you have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I would send people through to the iTravel York website. There is some information on cycle safety, cycling security. Also, the national cycling organisations will talk you through, the kind of locks that you maybe need to be using, etc., etc. I think again in York, there's been a huge investment of the cycle rack system. Yes, there isn't enough that it's really difficult. But again, I would suggest you contact us through at the council and suggest where locations would be useful, helpful. Some businesses and some schools can get funding from other places to actually put in cycle structures, cycle safe parking. So it's worth having a conversation with us, is what I'm saying. And if you don't know the direct person, just come through to me. That's fine.
Thank you. Some feedbacks around the locks being heavy and some other people saying potentially use 2 locks. So that's some good feedback there.
Yeah, one of the things that would be recommended. I mean, to be honest, it's a difficult one because if as I say, there's a whole national guidance from the police and crime prevention and so on as to how much you need to spend on a lock to the value of your bike, a good quality D-lock, etc. There's a lot of technique behind it, but we can talk about it. Happy to.
Fabulous, thank you. Susan has also asked about if there are any bike bus schemes planned for York schools.
Yeah, so bike bus schemes tend to happen on an individual one-by-one basis. So just before COVID, 2 of the schools in Holgate organised their own scheme that operated between the 2 schools. It was down one particular road, so it was literally like dominoes. Parents were driving to one place to walk the last bit, and then that cascaded onto the next school. So that tends to be done on a school by school basis. There's an awful lot of work done on travelling to school with the different schools across the city. Again, I would just recommend come and have an individual chat with us about it, because we can perhaps put you in touch then with the Active Travel Champion if you've got particular schools in mind.
Brilliant, thank you. Thomas, would you like to say something here? Is that an old hand or a new hand?
New hand. I was just going to add, yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like they've got some really good resources via travel, and echo what has just been said there. I just add the thing that I've got involved in campaigning for and pushing councils to do is put in accessible storage. And what I mean by that is it's not just for standard bikes. Friends with trikes or friends with adaptive wheelchairs, like folding bikes like Bromptons, etc. We often find cycling becomes inaccessible to you in terms of where you can go, because you need to go to the few places that have storage. And so I just make that point that when you are asking for these things, please do ask for something that will work for everyone.
Thank you, that's really useful.
Thomas. And I think it is a real thorny issue, and it's one that, as I say, is trying to be addressed, but part of it is as well, the more people that we have out there, the easier it becomes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think this was the final question from Susan. For you, Angela, with people working from home, has parents dropping off children at school using their cars reduced? And she said that the excuse was often they then had to drive on to work, which I think is a tricky one, having 2 small children and a job myself. I can see how it's very difficult. So do you think that has reduced while people have been working at home?
Potentially. I think it's always a difficult one. Even before the pandemic, you know, it was about sharing stories. I worked in some schools, I'd be chatting with parents and they'd say, you know, I'd be at parents evenings, we'd be talking about sustainable travel and how good it is for the kids and how the kids wanted it, but then I've got to get to work. So then it was a conversation, well, where do you work? And they didn't actually realise that whilst it took them 40, I think it was, trying to remember the detail, 40 minutes in the car on a bad day when the traffic was just a norm. And I recommended that even as a dawdle, they could cycle it in 20 minutes. So even if they walked their kids to school pushing their bike, if they didn't want the children on their bikes and then cycled on, it would be half the journey that it would take them in the car. So some of it is actually sharing stories, which is why I think it's important that we talk and that we encourage people. So when you looked at the photographs here as a collective community, I suspect many people would have kind of thought, well, yeah, I usually cycle, I usually walk. But part of it is actually when we try and reflect on how other people might feel. So that busy parent with the 2 children with work to go on to, it becomes a sudden kind of shutdown of the default. This is what I have to do to fit it all in. But if we can buddy them up, share them with the story of somebody saying, actually, no, I do it a different way. And that does work. I've seen it. It is labour intensive. So, but if we're all doing that, if we're all advocating the change, then I think it will help. And whereas the last question I think came through about the infrastructure, which is why infrastructure on its own is never just a solution on its own, that we have to have the other things that go alongside of it. So how do we work in that area to be sharing those stories and encouraging people to be talking about how it can happen? And Thomas's inspiration here, you know, it's about how people actually can begin to realise that it's doable for them, a journey at a time.
Fabulous, thank you. I think it's about those changing of habits, and it can be tricky for people sometimes to break free from what they've been used to and what feels like what they need to do, like you say. But I think those conversations are really useful. I just want to draw our attention in the chat. There's been a really good point from Richard Lane about a communal bike workshop. This one's in Glasgow, where you can pay to use their tools and equipment, and people there who know what they're talking about in terms of maintaining bikes, because there's been a few posts coming through in the chat around having the knowledge to maintain a bike, whereas you may take a car to a garage. Sometimes it can fall to the person who owns the bike to maintain it, or somebody mentioned about having appropriate spaces to clean bikes, and that can be tricky if you live in a flat and those kinds of things. So I think there's some really useful pieces of information coming up in the chat about that. Maybe not specific direct questions, but I've just noticed some of those coming through that I thought were really useful. So thank you for all of those.
One small point, if I could, on that one. If somebody undertakes an urban cycle skill, one of our adult cycle sessions, we always start with the basics of how to keep a bike safe, because there's a basic check that we can all learn to do very easily. And often that's quite empowering for people to think, oh, okay, so it's not about having all the tools at this point in time, it's actually understanding that that's what the problem is. So when I do go to the bike shop, or when I am looking online on the Cycling UK website about how I fix it, they've got a sort of better idea. So the idea of the urban cycle skill is not just about getting someone in traffic, but it's starting right at the beginning of how you actually keep your bike safe on the road. And it's one of the big barriers for people, especially with kids' bikes. You know, I've often come across people who just say, well, the bike's sitting in the shed, they just need pumped up tires, but I don't have a pump, I don't know how to do it. You know, so it's really trying very much to look at the whole situation.
Yeah, and I think it's about drawing people to the community, like you say, and that feeling of other people doing it as well, and being part of something, and having that support can often be really helpful for people, I think. So I have a final question here for you, Angela, from Richard. That you stressed individual actions for behaviour change, such as considering our own journeys, buddying up. He thinks that these tend to have a very marginal effect without changing the environment in which people make these decisions. It's simply too cheap and easy and comfortable to drive, and we need significant policy change, which is what was made in Amsterdam, Ghent, etc. Successful, active travel cities. And he wonders what the rest of the panel think on this dichotomy. Thank you for that, Richard.
Did you want me to make any response to that or any observation?
Yes, I think it's to you and you and everyone, really. I think
sorry to put in, we are going to have to move on shortly, so we've got time to do pledges. But I think Thomas, did you have your hand up, or was that from previous?
This is the last question I've got written down, Ali.
Okay. Yeah, any responses from panel would be welcome, as long as it's brief, because just making you aware we need to move on, so everyone's got time to talk about their pledges.
I think you're right, though. I think it's about policy change and you know, from the top down as well as from the bottom up, Richard. I definitely agree with that. And you know, I've been to Amsterdam a few times, and it's in action there, isn't it? Cars are way down the list. People first, bikes second, or maybe even the other way around. Actually, yeah, it's fabulous.
And it's a slow burner. It has been a slow burner over recent years. We've had since, you know, in the summertime last year of Department of Transport grant chaps, money, etc. Never enough. Of course, it isn't enough. And then people will say, well, so much is going on the road budget, so why can't we have more for the infrastructure? I think it's about really step at a time, do what we can. Make sure that what we put in is really good, really effective. It hasn't been dreamt up out of nowhere. You know, there's been people talking for quite a long time about where infrastructure needs to change, but actually recognizing that it has to be a whole bag, a suite of activities going on. So yeah, look ahead. You know, I can't give details tonight because it's still in the sort of offing, but hopefully before too long, there will be announcements made for York as to what's going to be happening. Quite a few exciting things.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Angela. We'll look out for that. So next up we have our, sorry, just give me a second. Next up we have our pledging session, which is the sort of action-based part of this session. So what we're going to do is break you all into, can you see the slide again now? Can you see the time to pledge? Yeah, good, thank you. We're going to break you all into breakout rooms so you can have a bit of a chat. We've put the Jamboard link in the chat a couple of times. I've just sort of posted it in the chat, so it's at the bottom, so you should all be able to find it. What we find works really well is once you're in a breakout room, you'll all be using the same Jamboard, so you can see things appearing as you're in there. But if you designate one person to write per group, to put your pledges in. And yeah, just have a bit of a chat if you can. If you're happy to put your name on there to help with accountability, that's fab. And I think we'll have, not sure how much time we'll have in there, but we'll give you as long as we can, and then we'll come back out to have a bit of a chat around those pledges. Pete, I think you're going to have to designate those rooms if possible. Fabulous. So if you all just go into the room you're asked to go into, and we will speak to you all soon.
Well, good, Alison. I think maybe Anne and Catherine are not in a room at the moment. I don't. Do either of you need any help to go into a room? I think I can assign you one if you want.
No, I was just doing a message. I've got to go.
Oh, right, okay.
I've got a choir Zoom.
Oh, bless you. Oh, lovely.
I've got to have a bite to eat before it. So I was just doing a message. Something that we've done and you know what we're going to do, so I'll do that. And
okay, well we can pop that onto the pledge board for you if you like. Yeah, thanks, Anne.
Perfect.
How about you, Catherine? Have you been given a room to go into, or are you not really there? It's hard to tell. I'll get your message, Anne, and then I'll pop into a room and pop it on a board.
I'll go and pop into a couple of rooms. So Alison, just
cool.
to check.
Lovely.
One is good.
How's it going?
It mutes me when I come in. I don't need to be tripped up in that way either. I'm quite capable of not unmuting myself rather than when I come back in from breakouts. I think that's a setting in it, but it's quite a good one because I think people forget to do it, and then you don't have to automatically get people to mute.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, room 4. I've just been into room 4. They were fine. They've got someone on the Jamboard and doing all that sort of stuff.
So if I go into room 1, which is the one I've been given, I don't know how to then come out of it. I can come out of it, obviously, but I don't know how to then go into a different one.
If you come back out, then I think you can click breakout rooms if you've got that option somewhere, and then you can see the rooms. And if you click near, the trouble is it depends on everyone's system slightly different. So someone will tell you where something is, and it'll be it's not there on mine.
Yeah, my screen's being weird. I can't really get the whole thing.
Do you have
like
options at the bottom of the screen? Like, do you have share screen polling?
I don't have polling, no. I've got share screen, annotate. I don't even know what annotate means. I've got join breakout room, but I think that's probably the room that you've given me. But I'll go into one anyway and pop Anne's pledge onto there, and at least. And how much time are we giving them? What have you set it for?
I'll just pull them out, but I think what do we need at the end? We can probably do the end in 8 minutes or so, can't we? Bringing it together. Yeah, okay. So
about 5 more minutes. Then,
yeah, close the room at 51 or something.
Cool. All right, see you in a bit.
Hello.
Yeah, all back. All back safely.
Oh no, have we left?
Yeah, have we lost Claire?
Claire.
In the transfer. Hopefully. Oh, she's there. She's there. She's there. We thought we'd lost you for a minute there, Claire, but you've appeared.
No, I've just been walking round because I find it difficult to sit for such a long period of time.
Oh, I agree. That's a good idea. I might do. We should do a mid session stretch maybe one time.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Good idea.
If anyone has any pledges they didn't manage to get up on the board, I've got it right here in front of me. So shout out and I will pop them on. Don't all, shout at once.
Make a little plea that came actually from the last minute discussion we had, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we've just talked about is new schemes, new infrastructure, whether it's low traffic neighbourhoods or new cycle lanes, that often what you get is the voice of people who want to complain against it. So people who don't want that lane in, who don't want that infrastructure because they think they've got to spend another 5 minutes in their car going on the detour. And what we find is that people, or I've done it myself in the past, I love a scheme, but I don't add to the consultation because why would I? Because I really like it. So one of the big messages, I think, and if we can put it in a pledge, is to encourage people, if they are supporting a scheme or whatever it might be from the other speakers, actually we encourage people to make that voice of support so that the views, the voice of the loud minority isn't taken as the default. Does that make sense?
That's so important. I think so many times it's the negatives that have the louder voice, and people who are happy with something. It's like anything, you go and eat at a restaurant and everything's fine, you don't write a review saying everything was fine. Some people do, most people don't. You only write a review if you're complaining, and I think that's something we could all do better at. So encourage others to be more vocal with their support of new schemes to counteract the negative voices.
I'd add on that and just say, and find out if you do like something or support a local scheme, if there is a local group that is supporting it, if you can kind of become a member of it. Sometimes just adding yourself to the Facebook group, you might find out about petitions and ways to contact MPs or councillors. And some of these things just take a few minutes. I'll post a link for They Work For You, which gives you email addresses of your MPs. But
that's a brilliant site.
But definitely do all of that. But that would be a very good thing if we all did that.
Yeah, I'd endorse that. I think that people who tend to be involved in these things, who are trying to make a difference, are usually quite sensitive individuals who listen. And probably I'll speak from experience on this. It's quite nice if people actually acknowledge that you're actually doing something useful. And when you're very much an activist, often you don't even take time to say to your fellow activists, actually, this is a great thing that you're doing and a great thing we're doing. And it's amazing how a small number of people can actually make quite an impact. I don't think, and I take the individual travel, the cycle lanes, everything like that. You're absolutely right that the people, the moaners and the complainers who just want whose only interest is in their own lives, they shout very often the loudest and dwarf the voice of the passive ones who say nothing but actually do support what's happening. So I go right along with that one.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alistair. I think that's a really good point. Is there anyone else who'd like to add anything to the Jamboard before we close? Capture all those pledges while we can.
Well, I'll pledge to say thank you to all those that are involved in anything that seems to be a good idea to me, and to make the effort, just a small email, that's my pledge. Yeah.
Thank you, Alistair, that's great.
I'll add another one, which is I've been quite busy with work and I've fallen out of favour with blogging, but Ivana inviting me to do this has made me think I should probably finish off one of my many draft posts. So I will do a blog post on car hire and car sharing, which is brilliant. How we've avoided car ownership now for 8 years and counting, and also been able to drive mostly with EVs.
Yeah.
Whilst not having to buy one.
Fabulous. Mark, were you thinking of saying something, or if you're just taking yourself off mute?
No, I rustled, and I can do it with good reason. I obviously these are meant to be transport related, aren't they?
It don't have to be. If you've got something else, it doesn't have to be. If you've got something else you want to share, then do share it.
No, I'll mix it up. I'll play along. I'll say I want to make more both regular and enthusiastic journeys, varied journeys on my bike, because I think the more people you can see out there on bikes, braving the traffic, laughing in the face of Tadcaster Road, Foss Islands Junction, yeah, not a problem. Just cruise through it.
When you say enthusiastic, you literally mean like laughing whilst you're cycling along, saying, "This is brilliant, cycling's the best."
Yeah, sort of, we're all going on a summer holiday. Cliff Richards, no. Just being out there, doing varied journeys around York. I think York can be quite fun to cycle around, even going to just sort of, seeing a random residential area. Oh yeah, you've never cycled to Bishopthorpe. Well, now's your chance. Just being out there encourages other people because they can see you cycling, might make them take it up. So it's sort of it's trying to get a connective thing going, and obviously on a personal level you can enjoy it and discover a new route. So mine is just a commitment to more cycling in York in general.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. That's fab.
Can I just interject? I'm not sure if Jess is still here, but Alistair, could you please repost the Galba link? Because I think Jess posted it originally, and Thomas has asked for that because I'm not sure the original link is working.
Oh, right. It's galba.uk is the web. Is
that the one you wanted, Thomas, or was it for a specific? My chat's disappeared now. Was it for the
petition? Maybe was it?
Yeah.
It was for the petition. It was for other people rather than my benefit. I think I've already signed it. I'm pretty sure I have.
Yeah.
Did the link that I posted not work?
No, the one I clicked didn't lead anywhere.
I think I've got it here. Alistair.
Thank you. Yeah. Just wanted to flag that before we left.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
I think it was the Cheers. I think it was the 38 degrees one rather than the first one you posted.
There you go. There's the 38 degrees one for everyone. Well, I'll say for everyone that's left, but we'll send all of the chat out in the follow-up email anyway, so it's all good. So, unless we've got any other pledges, well, thank you all for coming, and it's been really fabulous to have such invigorating conversations around the subject. And we have managed to get the next 3 dates for the next 3 Talk and Taking Actions arranged. We're still negotiating time, so we'll let you know about those. But for those of you that want to get those in your diary, that's them on the screen now. We will be sending an email out, as I said, afterwards with the chat and any information that we think is useful. If you guys want to be added to the Slack channel, one of the things we're trying to do with Talk and Taking Action is connecting people, helping people build up a network of support, so you can help each other on your pledges, but also so you can build relationships. I've already seen a couple of sort of connections being made in breakout rooms tonight, which is always brilliant to see. So if you join the Slack channel, that's a really good way of staying in contact with people and continuing those conversations offline. So let us know via email if you want to do that. Oh, got someone coming a little bit late to the party. But yeah, so that's us really. We'll be, like I say, we'll be emailing you out information from tonight's session, and just thank you all very much for coming and for giving your time.
Thanks for organising it, Alison.
Very welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys. We'll hope to see
thanks to all the speakers.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and giving your time to talk to us. And we hope to see you all again on the 20th of April to talk about stuff.
If you have any tips for speakers to talk, we've got one of my colleagues talking about Precious Plastics York project, but we're welcome to suggestions for others, so please do.
Anyone who's to do with secondhand clothing, vintage, reusing things, or refurbished electronics, anything that's about encouraging people to reuse things and avoid buying new. Let us know if you can think of anyone, or even if it's you that would like to come and talk to us about that sort of thing.
Cheers.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy taking action in the meantime.
Bye, guys.